Today, we're going to be diving into the trends that are shaping the digital workplace. And if you could advance to the next slide. So we're going to be diving into the trends that are shaping the digital workplace, followed by defining what modern management is, the assessment as the first step in the journey to modern management, and the next steps to get started. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Gary Beckett from DXC. Gary, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Darian. So we're going to talk about what's driving the need and the shift towards modern management. And as you can see here, the digital workplace is becoming defined by a number of drivers. First of all, the need to deliver a consumer-style, personalized service to individuals who consume those services. So we've all become used to a very slick consumer-like interface outside of the business environment, and end users are demanding the same slick, easy to use, easy to consume environment in the workplace. They also want flexibilities. We see things like the gig economy where worker engagements are becoming shorter. The ability to onboard and offboard employees in an automated and secure manner is really important. Alongside that, being able to provide connectivity ubiquitously, irrespective of the location. Work is no longer a place people go to. It's a task or a set of tasks that complete in the location on the device that they have to hand in a secure, flexible, meaningful way for those individuals. And at the heart of that, mobility is everything to everybody within that digital workplace. So the ability to provide the corporate assets, corporate data, corporate applications on whatever device people choose to use is becoming the real important element within that mobile workplace, digital workplace. Clearly, alongside that, being able to provide data security, control the corporate assets, control accesses, and provide secure connectivity for employees is really important. Giving choice around support methods and how people engage with the IT model is important. And as you can see there, it talks about cost efficiencies. So intelligent assistance is being built into those solutions, the use of AI chatbots, etc., to give people choices about how to receive support. So that really talks to those things that are shaping the modern digital workplace. The next slide. So really, if we look at the trends that are driving change within that digital workplace, we've got the Windows 10 deadlines approaching. So the baseline building block of any modern digital workplace is a modern operating system, and Windows 10 is certainly that. We've seen it introduces new levels of security, the ability to be more flexible, and the Windows servicing update changes that are now part of the update procedures for Windows 10. So twice annual updating. What that means for businesses, the migration is becoming an important part of the overall topic around modern management. And with the impending end of support for Windows 7 in January 2020, it's becoming more of an urgent requirement. The consumerization of IT, as it says there, means that many of us are already running Windows 10 at home. We've become familiar with the interface, we've become familiar with the benefits, the tools that it brings, and the approach that Microsoft has introduced to keep those up to date. So it's important that, if you like, that free learning that we've all done at home can be applied in the workplace, and the expectation of those end users can be fulfilled in that they are being presented with the same operating system within the workplace that they've got at home. So when we look at the competing vendor ecosystems to work out who's the best player to work with on those kind of migration challenges, so it's important to be able to understand and test those vendor capabilities, look at a migration design that minimizes risk, minimizes the time, and supports the old and the new environments. So what we'll talk about shortly is what we call co-management. So being able to manage legacy devices as well as new devices in a modern way. Moving on to the next slide. So really, I talked about modern management there. I mentioned what do we mean by modern management? Well, really, it's about providing what we termed here a lightweight set of agile management approaches for device estates that provide a flexible approach. And also at the heart of them are cloud-based solutions that allow us to connect the device irrespective of location. And reduces the complex on-premise investments required to manage device estates. The introduction of Windows 10 and many people now subscribing to Microsoft 365 and the ATP, Advanced Threat Protection security tools that come as part of those licensing bundles means that they can be capitalized upon in a modern management environment. Certainly, we're looking to improve the end user experience and provide that consumer style of IT. And essentially, modern management through Intune, Microsoft's modern management solution, provides essentially the same style of engagement that end users have been used to with perhaps smartphones, where they've enrolled their smartphones on an MMD solution. So in the same way, you would enroll your PC device, your Windows OS device, in the Intune modern management device management solution. It also means that the shift is really towards investing in the principles and the culture within the workplace of self-service, so that users within the workplace can apply the same learning and cultural norms that they've been using outside of the workplace within the enterprise. So device management with identity and data protection solutions enables the device to become an agnostic solution in the approach to the way that work is delivered. So the device becomes something which the end user takes the responsibility for to a certain extent, as they do within the consumer type environment. Next slide. So looking at some of those principles in an architectural point of view, if you look on the right-hand side of this slide, what we've got there are the enterprise managed resources like Office 365. Normally, enterprises would provide some type of company portal that normally provides some self-service functionality, and we would have the Intune application alongside that. The Windows Store for Business that people have become familiar with System Center Configuration Manager, or SCCM as it's known. So that App Store can be operated alongside Intune. And then within Intune, the service allows apps to be pushed onto devices through the MSIs that have been created, the packages or core wrapped MSIs that can be created in the modern management approach. And so within that tool set, we can apply Windows Defender policies, security compliance policies, individual management policies that are bespoke to the enterprise itself, the company itself. And we can also define the update approach to the way the OSs and the applications are updated. And that is done, as you can see there, through Azure Active Directory join devices, which can also be members of an on-prem Active Directory, as you can see there in the middle of the chart, to allow you to have a co-management approach to the way that you can manage these devices. Because we recognize that many institutions are not greenfield, they're not startups, so they are starting from a legacy base of either Windows 7 or Windows 8.1 devices and are migrating on a journey towards Windows 10, and at the same time probably either investigating or implementing modern management alongside that. And then the benefits that that provides, so we can have the auto health attestation service that is provided by the Microsoft Cloud, and the update service, including things like the antivirus signature updates, etc., all provided via Intune via the Windows servicing approach. So essentially, what we're laying out there is how an enterprise can take advantage of Microsoft's provided enterprise services to maintain the currency of devices and software, and also apply enterprise-specific policies and security compliance tools to the same environment to maintain those standards that are required by the enterprise itself. Next slide. So what we've got on here is a simple graphic that demonstrates the various paths to what we call modern management. So I talked about startup greenfield sites. So essentially, a cloud first start with modern workloads means that essentially they can be initiated with modern management in isolation, so with Intune to manage the estate. Also, we've worked with some clients that have done big switch transitions where essentially modernize all the workloads at once. So they move from the SCCM tool to Intune in one motion, pretty swift. Those kind of enterprises have got modern application suites that don't constrain them to maintain some machines at the old standard, either 8.1 or 7. So that's one approach. The third approach, the group by group transition, probably using resource groups within AD, within Active Directory, to define the upgrade rings, if you like, that you would move across onto modern management. So transition groups with modern workloads, with modern app portfolios that can be moved to modern management, and then move the remaining groups once those application issues or those security issues have been solved, and move across onto that. And then the last approach that we've been working with a number of clients on is what we call co-management, where we maintain a proportion of the estate on the existing management solution, and we move the proportion of the estate that can move over onto the new Intune solution, and we can coexist between those two solutions. So we can maintain those traditional workloads, and we can apply also the modern workloads that essentially are delivering the same standards in the new modern management approach. The next slide. So what we tried to lay out here is how the Windows Autopilot process and experience is delivered to the end users. So if you think about the typical Windows out-of-box experience at the bottom of the slide, you receive a new device, you power on the device, you get the standard Windows out-of-box experience, and essentially that starts with which language, which keyboard layout do you want, and then connects to the network. Enter the user's credentials, so the user validates themselves, and then the device connects to Azure AD and Intune and completes the build for that particular user that's defined by the policies and procedures, etc., by the enterprise within their Intune image in the cloud. And essentially, the out-of-box experience is the same consumerized experience that you would see on a home device as you would in the enterprise. So if you look at the device lifecycle at the top of this slide, we manage everything from the procurement with the OEMs, the deployment to the end user, ensuring the device is ready for the end user to be productive. And then in the lifecycle, in the fourth block there, you've got device management through use of Intune, any break fix that's required through the life cycle of that device over the coming years. And then at the end of its usable life, the retirement of that device and the recycling of that device at the end of it. So essentially the physical process and the virtual process that allows the management of those devices through that autopilot experience. Next slide. And this slide really talks to the intelligent image approach. So the Windows 10 modern experience really is about how do we, as it says there in the box on the right, through Cloud MDM and Windows Update, how do we define security policies, maintain drivers, patches and updates to maintain the security of the device, change and update user entitlement and the applications that the end user has access to, and push down the device management policies that maybe restrict print in a certain environment, maybe restrict connection of removable media, etc., depending on the security environment that the device is being operated in. And then at the other side, we've got the original equipment manufacturer's factory applied or USB applied security policies. You know, DXC could have built an intelligent image for you in terms of defining security within Windows 10. And there may be a group of business applications that go onto every image that's issued, irrespective of the role within the enterprise. And of course, you know, applying again those same device MDM policies in that same secure way that we can do it from the cloud. And then the Microsoft Autopilot, Azure AD Cloud authentication and device enrollment data ensures that that device is commonly managed and commonly known about by the Azure AD and the local AD as well. So essentially, it's about providing the level of security, level of flexibility, and the updates that are required to maintain the currency of that device, its image, and the applications that reside on it. Next slide. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Stuart, who's going to talk us through how we would go about understanding that journey and what's right for your enterprise. Stuart.
Thank you, Gary. So as we've heard from Gary, he's talked about the modern digital workplace and how it's underpinned by modern management and Windows 10, and which will deliver this consumer-like, personalized experience, driven by mobility, the demands for that, the ability to collaborate more and more. So I think what to summarize, what we've heard is the destination. So like I said, that's the journey. So Gary set out the journey. So just like any journey, it depends where you start from. If you're going on a train journey from Leeds to Manchester, there's going to be people joining at various stops on the way. And within professional services as DXC, we have a number of engagements can help you. We can deep dive, and this is probably going to be a future webinar where we can deep dive a lot more around modern management and understand how we can help you on that journey. But for this one, it's all about Windows 10, as that's the underpin. And what we're finding with clients, no matter where you are on your journey to Windows 10, there is things we can do to help accelerate. So one of the real key ways to accelerate is our Windows 10 assessment. And let's just get real here. We're finding on average, compared to a manual exercise, we are getting 80% plus faster data and the ability to analyze and make key decisions. So 8% project speed acceleration using this. So what is this assessment we've got? Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple of key areas from the assessment. So the first one is hardware. And again, we're seeing lots of clients looking at hardware refresh in terms of enabling them to move to Windows 10. I'm also looking at a lot of clients who have got a reasonably modern estate and want to know, is that hardware compatible? So one of the first things we do is the hardware compatible? And obviously we use Microsoft's minimum and recommended specs. So there are two different specifications there. And what we're finding is, it's very valuable information, particularly if you've got a mixed aged estate. The next thing we do with our hardware assessment is we look at processors end of life, and then we look at the availability of Windows 10 drivers. So why a machine may be compatible with the recommended spec, what we've found is actually the processor is end of life, or the availability of Windows 10 drivers is not there. So what does that really mean from a project perspective? It means risk, i.e., while the hardware may be able to take the Windows 10 image, it doesn't mean that it will actually work on that device. Now, let me give you a client example here. So a recent client we did an assessment with, and we've got a number of other engagements around accelerating their journey to Windows 10 and modern management with. They had a really good understanding of their hardware state. We did the assessment. The first step, is it compatible? 2 devices were not compatible. Obviously, we confirmed what the client believed at the time. Then we shared the data in terms of processor end of life and availability of Windows 10 drivers. And 50% of their devices in their estate failed that part of our assessment on that basis. So thinking of planning and moving to Windows 10, if I was a user, we've talked about improving the customer experience and it being much more consumer-like, not very consumer-like if you're waiting, you're sitting there and your Windows 10 upgrade fails because of issues with processors or drivers. So really demonstrated a lot of value there to our clients. Okay. The next key thing we found as well is we're starting to see maybe the actual model is the same, but there's differences in BIOS, and therefore some of that has resulted in the BIOS upgrades failed because of that. So again, a lot of value in what we're delivering here. And another question we get asked a lot and we advise clients around is, should we do wipe and load versus in-place upgrade? Good news is the assessment based on the data collected from the hardware will actually inform that and tell you which devices you could do as an in-place upgrade and which ones you can't. So that's the first key area. Moving on now to the next key area, applications. Applications are the lifeblood of any enterprise. So what we do, we do a deep assessment around applications. And again, we start off at looking at the apps data, which is in your systems. So, a real recent client example here is they had 13 million rows of data around applications. And the first step is to collect that data and it's to normalize it. So what do I mean by that? So we took 13 million rows of data and we ended up with 7,000 rows of data. So let me give you an example to make it real to you. You may have Adobe within your estate, but you'll have multiple versions of Adobe, multiple probably different names as well. So you may have Adobe, you may have Adobe Ink, etc. So within your, say, SCCM, if you're Microsoft, then you could have multiple versions, multiple naming conventions around that application. So we normalize it, we get it down to a set of data which is much more easy to analyze. The next thing, we look at compatibility. So we assess that data against a compatibility database. And at the end of that assessment, we'll tell you per application if it's compatible or not. If it's compatible, fantastic. If it's not, we'll tell you whether or not it's upgradable. And not only will we tell you, yes, it's upgradable, but we'll give you real valuable information on what's the minimum version to upgrade that to. So there you're starting to see how this can really influence your project to move to Windows 10. And then at the end of the day, we've found that there is incompatible applications or where we've got no data in the database about that. In terms of incompatible applications, then this is where apps modernization and apps modernization strategies can come into play. So we always ask, okay, this is incompatible. What would you recommend? And this is where we look at it from an apps modernization hat on. Is it something we can retire? Can we actually rehost that, etc., etc. There's a number of ways we can look at the applications which are incompatible and allow you to move to Windows 10. Then we look at relevancy. So again, is it relevant for Windows 10? And we're finding lots of application information stored in various databases isn't relevant for Windows 10. So a simple example is a Windows 10 driver. If it's a Windows 7 driver, it's not going to be relevant for Windows 10. And there's things like KB patches as well. So let's talk a bit about the added value as well of doing this application assessment. So you've heard how the apps assessment can really help you understand your application landscape. And what we are finding is around 86% on average of applications within enterprises, within our customers, are compatible, which means there's quite a percentage which aren't, which need to be looked at and investigated. So some of the added value things you'll also get from an assessment with us is we look at the age of the applications and if that presents a security risk. So a recent client example again, we'd done the assessment and we're presenting back to the client, and I asked the question, how old is the oldest application in your estate? The consensus was between 7 and 9 years. The facts were the oldest application we found was 14 years old. And it hadn't had any security patches for at least 10 years, but yet that's sitting there. So, obviously there's a real security risk, which we helped the client then with our security practice close that risk down. And in fact, that was just one example. We had many examples. So it also helped the whole security and hardening down their infrastructure. So, and a final one, if you do have, where it says on the slide, where available, license usage. We also look at the license usage there. So a great thing there is, let's think of an application which can be really expensive, like a CAD/CAM. So we'll be able to identify how many versions of CAD/CAM is out in your estate. So let's say 100. And then we actually, if it's turned on, we can let you know within the last 90 days whether that was actually used. And in a recent client example there, we've found only around 15 or 20% of installs of actually what's CAD/CAM was used in the last 90 days. So there's a real opportunity to save some money there around license. And in fact, it also kicked off a project with one of our SLMS experts to come and do a deeper assessment around license usage. So next slide, please. So what do you get? Well, here's an example report. So you'll get a report delivered from us, which will contain all this information. And much more than that, you'll get a dashboard. And what you're seeing is a screen print actually from the dashboard. And as you see this dashboard, you can click on the dashboard, you can drill down into further levels of detail based on what we actually captured. How long does it take? It's a great question. Typically 7 to 10 days. It's never taken longer than 10 days. So again, thinking about acceleration, thinking about not only compared to manual how fast it is, but the ability for us as a team to come in, undertake end-to-end this engagement, running the tools, collecting the data, creating the report, creating a dashboard, and again, that's left with you to drill down on. And also what we're finding is that information has been gold dust in terms of planning a migration. Depending where you're on that journey, it can really help identify a user community in terms of doing a pilot or proof of concept around Windows 10. So that's what you'll get. Another thing to point out is that's one way. So we use a number of tools within our assessment, and this is purely from an assessment perspective. But the other big question is, if you've got a large number of users and spreadsheet isn't an option to manage the rollout, is how are you going to manage your rollout? And this is where this tool set can be ran in full mode, which gives you additional functionality and features and enables you to control and command, as we call it, but manage the actual deployment of Windows 10. So let me just talk about some of the key features there, because again, what we're finding is a lot of our clients have then either as part of doing an assessment or post an assessment have seen the value of this and the tool and how it can use to run and manage a migration. So again, what some additional features is what we call the project. So we create a project within the tool, and that will actually then link users to applications, applications to devices. So think of what I said about the compatibility. You could mark it within the tool an application compatible, and that will instantly show you which users. Therefore, you could move to Windows 10 tomorrow. And as you're going through your application testing, as you're going through your package testing, you can start to mark these things as green. It will immediately show you users available. So it helps you in terms of the ramp up of users, helps you in terms of identifying a set of users to be part of a pilot if that's how you want to move forward around migrating to Windows 10. Some of the other wonderful features, going back to what Gary first said about consumer-like personalized experience, improving that experience, is it does scheduling, it does emails. We can communicate with the users to say you are now scheduled to migrate to Windows 10. And it allows the user to actually say, well, you know, you're scheduled for tomorrow. You can then come back and respond and schedule your upgrade to a different day. So, for example, if you're out with your clients tomorrow and you're scheduled, you can actually reschedule that meeting yourself. So puts you and puts the users in control as well in terms of scheduling that migration. So again, really helps users move to Windows 10 in a very smooth control way. So very different to some of the experiences we saw within the marketplace with previous upgrades. So that's it from me. So back to Gary.
Thank you, Stuart. So, you know, one of the things that we wanted to also talk about was the move towards what's now referred to as device as a service. So we've talked about user experience, and what we've got here is a chart that talks about how we can drive an improvement in that user experience. And DaaS, or device as a service, can be defined across this whole path or a proportion of this path. So device as a service is very much something we're familiar with smartphones, where we pay for a 2 or 3 year contract that includes the device and a set of services surrounding that device, so that we have a fully managed approach to the way that device is provided to us. So in a similar way, we can provide any device in that way. As it says here, the device only, we could provide the financing, the factory services to provision it, things like asset management, warranty, break fix and claim, and also the refresh at the end of its useful life. Alongside that, we would propose to bundle the device management of that item. Things like Windows servicing we would provide, and that would give us the operating system support and also some apps management. We could also provide the management of a bespoke image, the ability for end users to use Autopilot for essentially a zero IT touch relationship, so the end user can rebuild their machine using the Autopilot image. We can also manage the device security and also provide analytics from the devices that are out there in the state. In terms of enterprise services, things like health monitoring, full apps lifecycle management across the apps that are being deployed on those devices. We can provide custom images, and we can also provide some advanced exchange when, say, a business has got demands that require higher power machines, where we've got new software. We can also build that into the model. So essentially providing that user centricity in terms of the solution, so a self-service portal, using things like device vends for remote sites, walk-in support centers at larger sites, and also video kiosk support, where end users can use a video kiosk to provide live support from somebody in a remote location. And you know, things that we talked about earlier in the conversation, like AI chatbots to provide intelligent, repeatable support. And also we can enable the locations to be smart using Internet of Things technologies and beacons, smart beacons, so we can keep track of devices and essentially provide more of a managed solution around the device, what we've called device as a service. On to the next slide. And so what we've got on this slide is essentially a model that shows that full life cycle. So if you think about the device life cycle process from the end user or their manager places an order through a hardware catalog, it goes into a provisioning engine, which is normally driven by the supply chain. That would go out to factory services and stock management at the OEM. Then there'll be some logistics to deliver that device to the end user. And then, as we talked about earlier in this presentation, the end user would then enter their credentials. The device build would finish, and then essentially the end user is then productive on the device. We talked about modern management and the support services wrap that goes around that through Windows servicing as well, and the device management. And we talked about the lifecycle management at the bottom of the chart there around hardware refresh. We can do secure data disposal, and clearly the asset management that runs alongside that. So essentially, what we've talked about here is what's referred to as the last Windows migration project, because Windows 10 will continue to be updated by Microsoft. And in the same way, we can provide that continuous lifecycle update of the device on whatever life cycle is agreed, whether it's 2, 3, 4, or 5 year life cycle. On to the next chart. Two examples here where we've worked with clients, large enterprises. First one, a European based telecoms company, where essentially we moved a large proportion of the estate to modern management. Some of the devices remained on the SCCM solution. It allows us to maintain policies through SCCM. It allowed us also to provide support to the client around things like managed print and application services and enterprise service management. And we're also working with that particular client to move them to Office 365. A little known fact is that when Windows 7 support is ended, there will be a requirement for a Windows 10 image for clients to be able to access their Microsoft 365 services. So again, reinforcing the importance of moving to the modern desktop. The other one is a large global manufacturing company, which was a spin-off from a very large enterprise. We migrated the vast majority of those users to modern management with mobility. We did have a small proportion of the estate that remained behind, but we managed those through Intune by an agent that's been applied to that. We can also do the modern application downloads to those devices handled by Intune, and we are managing some of the application downloads to that legacy estate via a third-party portal, but that will shortly move to Intune. So essentially, they are examples of where we have defined a co-management approach. It allows the business to continue without disruption. It allows you to move a large proportion of your enterprise estate to modern management, whilst being able to maintain legacy numbers where that's necessary, as the issues preventing the migration to modern management Windows 10 are dealt with. On to the next slide. So really summarizing DXC's ability to support clients and enterprises on that migration to modern management. We talked about the drivers. We talked about, Stuart presented a very short, sharp assessment that we can do. We've got the scale and skills. We're a global organization. We operate across the globe in all the continents that you can see there, 150,000 plus employees. We do run an integrated agile delivery model, which means that very much we operate in a sprint and scrum mentality. We have significant number of clients across those industry sectors, whether it's healthcare, insurance, banking, travel and transportation, etc. So we have industry experience to understand the problems that our clients are facing and the pressure points that they're dealing with. We also work with our technology partners like Microsoft. So we work with the best in the industry to solve technology-driven innovation requirements for our clients. So we do that through a number of offering families, as you can see there, and workplace and mobility is one of those key offering families. Thank you. So really summarizing the discussion today and how to get started on this and accelerate the journey to the modern mobile enterprise. Very much encourage you to contact the people mentioned on the slide, whether Manuela, Sean or Darian at Microsoft, and very much around the assessment services that Stuart outlined, contact Stuart himself. And I think with that, we're going to move to Q&A.
So just as part of Q&A, there'll be a link in a minute posted for a feedback form.
All right. I am currently posting that link. Just give me 1 second, please.
Thank you.
All right, so the link to the feedback form is in the chat window, so feel free to, click on that and then respond. This would be a kind of like a way for us to be able to contact you if there's something that you wanted to move forward with. And then in addition, I also wanted to state that we are going to be emailing out a recording of this session along with the deck and the feedback form as well. So all of this will be sent in a follow-up email. Are there any questions at this time? If there's a question that you think about later, we did include our contact information at the end of the deck that we'll be sending out, so that's a way that you can get a hold of any of us if you have any questions afterwards. Well, with that being said, we can conclude this session. So thank you everyone for joining. We appreciate your time and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.